Welcome everybody. We will be recording, as you might have got the notification for this webinar. So we will also be sending out replays following this webinar today. So thank you for joining us here for our Arctic Wolf webinar with Jim Prudhomme and Ryan Ramsey. I'm Nathan, the outside sales consultant for SNL International, which is located here in Los Angeles, California. We're kind of all over the place, but we love having you today. Also with the webinar, if you could jump in at any time if you have any questions. We're going to try to make this kind of an interactive webinar, go through the slides and take questions as we go. And then thank you for your patience in attending the full webinar. We will follow up with you in a few days and give you that complimentary gift card, e-gift card for Grubhub that will follow an email. Next slide, please. All right, so who is SNL? Who's SNL International? We're a Los Angeles or Arcadia-based consulting firm in IT sales and solutions. So everything from data security, systems and infrastructure, so anything that plugs and goes and makes your server run, and also data protection. So the way we kind of break it down is with data security, you have a bunch of data, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem, and we want to help you keep that secure. So we offer a variety of different solutions within that category. And again, kind of as I mentioned, that all has to run on something. So that's whether it's cloud infrastructure, on-prem, or storage. We can offer and talk to you about solutions within that category. And you have all this data, and if at some point we want to make it available to you, and always keep it up, right? So whether that is storing it or if you don't have any sort of data loss, things like that, we also have a category and sales solutions within that as well. Next slide, please. We've also been in business for 25 years. So we haven't just been around the block. We've been within IT for a long time. Most of the people within our company have been with 2 digits with us, which I'll kind of mention here. So we don't just have like 1 or 2 things in each category. We have quite a list with the 3 categories that I've gone over. So we do our best to meet with our clients and go over customized solutions that fit for our client in their client size. So it's whether it's someone from like an 80 to 100 user, medium to small business, that could be anywhere from 500 to 1,000 or 1,500 above. We've worked with all clients in those user sizes, so we would fit detailed solutions for your particular company and for your user base. We would provide comprehensive updates. So that's what a little bit of what we're doing today. We partnered with Arctic Wolf for some time, so we're here to inform our client base of what's new with Arctic Wolf. If you've never heard of them before, what they do, and kind of following up, we will go over how we can maybe implement it into your environment. And we have adaptive support. So we have over a dozen engineers on our team and a handful of salespeople that you can contact more or less 24 hours a day. Our engineering team has got some experience. Again, like I mentioned, they have about 15 years average of experience within IT services and a variety of different expertises. Again, whether it's something like Arctic Wolf or virtual machines, storage, email security. Again, we kind of do it all. We built relationships over the past 25 years in business. So again, anyone from possibly your local major hospital. We do one of them here in Southern California, or to your local mom and pop business down the street. We do our best to kind of meet you, have lunch with you, go over a solution and kind of build, depending on what your IT initiatives are throughout the year. And I know I can speak for myself in regards to responsiveness. If you need to get a hold of me 24 hours a day, feel free to text, call, or email me. I'm most available by text, but we will be there for you if your data center goes down, also even over the weekend. So, but I will turn it over to our senior engineer, Jim.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is having a good Thursday. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about myself. I've been with SNL for 20 plus years, actually. I'm a network and security engineer. That's kind of my trade. And really the focus of our talk today is kind of a day in the life of. This is really kind of I don't want to say reality check, but the reality of what we're seeing handling our clients' security requirements, what it's like today, and how it's been changing. We've noticed, and I don't know if this is your experience, but we've noticed quite a dramatic shift in the types of security incidents that we've been having to deal with. And I really just kind of to walk you through what we've done, what works for us, kind of what the bare minimum has been, and what we see as kind of the evolving trend or method to deal with, effectively deal with the security threat landscape that we're going to have to contend with. Hopefully, no one on the call's had to deal with something that is a major breach, but we're finding more and more clients are having to do that. We're also seeing that these types of attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated and targeted. And I'd say that's really the differentiation that we've seen in the last couple of years. You know, it kind of went from script kiddies with just normal attacks. You can see that on your firewall, IPS if you've got that. And it's just kind of the day in and day out, but the level of sophistication and the attack surface has grown considerably. I don't know how many folks have been exposed to the Log4j or the SolarWinds attacks, or even Okta. Those are very sophisticated, and those are very tough to contend with. So what I wanted to focus on our time today, and really the input to give you, is what have we done, what do we do, what have we done, and what doesn't work, really. So that's really the benefit. The reason why we do this is because it may be something that fits you. No one likes to discuss what their problems are, right? So I'll kind of do that for you. And if it makes sense, it's like, hey, that's me. That's what I do today. Then you might have a good takeaway. So that's really what we hope you get out of today's time with us. All right. So if that makes sense, we'll go on. Heidi, if you want to go to the next one. So this is what we see is the nature of the issue with the majority of our clients, if not all. You know, if there is a spectrum of security, you're somewhere on it. I guess you could say that in using modern terms. But the reality is that the four things that you see in front of you is really sort of what people generally regard as their security kind of hodgepodge, right? Most people will get a security scan or audit. You have to now for your cybersecurity. So at least once a year, you'll get a vulnerability scan, all right? Waiting once a year to figure out what's problematic, probably not the best idea. What we find is that people will typically try to look at their problems as a tactical sort of way to kind of break it up. It's a very large problem, so they'll try to parse it into workable chunks. So they'll look at things like, you know, Active Directory security or perimeter security. So maybe they'll look at something like, well, we'll go to a next-gen firewall, we'll beef up our IPS. Maybe you'll do something like a web application firewall, right? So you've got all these little tactical projects that call in different levels of expertise, but you're really trying to attack the general problem of, I need to deal with all of these security, you know, entry, egress points, and applications. It's very difficult also to take a product, you know, you've got a vendor that has a product, they know it works in their specific use case. It may not be yours generally, and things change, right? So no one is generally, you know, kind of keeping up with it. You install a product, it's working, but it doesn't really get maintained adequately or properly. And that's just a reality. Most folks are pretty good about keeping up to date for things like their Windows patching. We see it less so for things like their firewall OS or even their signature updates. That's an ongoing, tedious, tough process, and it frequently doesn't get done, and that's the reality of it, right? And last, there's no real objective measurement that people can use as a yardstick to say, well, where am I now? How good is my security now versus, where it should be, right? And that's tough, right? So all these things are difficult, and it leads to either they kind of this piecemeal approach, or something that doesn't necessarily fit together, right? And what I've kind of broken it down into two things. Most people don't understand the security posture, or they don't understand or have a security framework to provide a guideline, right? So is that a fair assessment for everyone? I'll assume it is, unless somebody says no. By the way, Heidi's monitoring the chat. If you've got any input or feedback or question, just put it in the chat, or feel free to take yourself on mute and say yeah or nay. I can go to the next slide. All right, so what happens? Well, like I said, you kind of try to break it up into smaller things, right? So a lot of people, what happens after they get their annual audit, you kind of get the slap in the face, and what do? You take the list, they'll give you a list, and you go fix it. Have them scan it again and say, okay, great, no problem. What we see a lot of people trying to do, and it actually is not a bad idea if everything works, is they try to homogenize their solutions with a single vendor, right? So they'll say, well, I'm going to use vendor X for my firewall. They also have an endpoint. They also have a cloud SASE or solution. And if I use all of their stuff, it'll all talk to each other and all will magically work, and I'll be done. No problem. Well, that's a pretty big ask, because I'm sure lots of us have the experience where we have got the product, you get it in, and it's like, it doesn't really kind of work as advertised, or I thought it was going to help me, but it's really not. It's not meeting my needs in my particular use case, right? One of the things that we see, and I think everyone can also speak to this, myself included, is constant reactive, kind of Band-Aid, plugging, taking your fingers and plugging the holes in the dike. That's tough. That is very, very tough. And that's reality, I think, of where most people find themselves today. And last, and this is really, when it comes to reporting to your management or the folks that are, cutting the checks for projects, you're only as good as your last mistake, right? So what happens is that your overall metric for how well you're doing is how much stuff you've gotten deployed, right? So we deployed a new round of firewalls, we implemented a WAF, whatever that is. It's not that we've actually improved security, it's that we've just thrown more stuff at the problem, with the expectation that the more stuff we throw at it, right, the better our security is going to be. Okay, still don't have that objective measurement yet. All right, let's go to the next one. So how's it working? Our experience is most of the time it's not. That's just the reality. If it were, I doubt that you'd be on this call. All right. So I think most folks are looking for something that is going to address the issues they're having, and kind of have that fire and forget solution. All right. Let's go to the next slide. So we don't really have necessarily a product problem. We got plenty of products, right? That's not the issue. Let's go to the next one. It's how they're used, and more importantly, how they're monitored. All right. So how do we fix that? And what we found over time, and I've done this for countless customers, because we typically, when we engage with a client, our mission isn't to make it our own platform, right? That's not what we do. We're infrastructure specialists. So what does that look like to me and you, right? So what that would look like is I would go in, we would sit down with you, figure out that let's say we needed a SIEM, all right? We'd evaluate, we'd implement, I'd integrate all your stuff. I'd build that tool for you. It's your tool. I may monitor it for you, right? But I'm still building, right? So this is what we do. And as Nathan mentioned, we've got a wide breadth of clients. Sometimes that is just way too much of an ask for a client for an outlay in both operational costs and just effort. All right. Sometimes it's just, hey, let's just build a syslog repository so that at least we've got some forensic data. And that's really kind of a break glass thing. It's like, well, if I can't really look at stuff in real time, I'm going to do my best, but I'll dump all my logs in one place. And that way, if I absolutely have to, if there is a breach, I've got some forensic data that we can reconstruct what happened, right? And you notice a lot of the time when I'm talking about this, I'm using the past tense, right? We're going back, we're looking at logs, right? We're not doing things in real time, right? We're kind of reconstructing the accident. Right. It's like the highway patrol back in the old days, there'd be a car accident. They'd go out with a tape measure and they'd look at the broken glass and the skid marks. They'd draw a diagram and they'd say, okay, this car was doing 72 miles an hour and hit the car. That's kind of what it is today, rather than, well, it's a Tesla and it has collision avoidance, right? We just didn't have the accident to begin with. That's really where we want to get to, right? We want to kind of get to the collision avoidance rather than what we can reconstruct the accident with great fidelity, right? So this is kind of where this is now. This is what my world looks like today, right? We evaluate and test products, just like I said. I build it. Maybe I have to displace the old one because it's not working. We've got to get everybody up to speed on it on your staff. You have to know how to operate the thing, right? You may have to hire a dedicated resource to look at that. The tool is only as good as somebody actually doing something about it, right? Then you need to fix it, right? Tool says there's a problem. Hey, alert, you got an issue, you've got a patch, you've got something going on, you have to remediate or recover from the issue, right? And then what are you going to do? You're going to go back and do it again. You're going to keep testing to make sure that the efficacy of these things are still of value, right? That's a very vicious circle, right? Does this resonate with everyone? You don't have to answer because I know people like to do that on webinars, but hopefully it does. And this is the reality of what we've seen. So what do we do? Well, I don't want to do this. So let's go to the next slide. So let's hit the easy button. All right. So what I'd like to do is turn this over to Ryan with Arctic Wolf and let him introduce you to SOC as a service. The benefit that we're seeing to this is that it allows us to go into our existing customers who have, kind of that hodgepodge of security solutions, some of which are very kind of the best in class, right? You might have a CrowdStrike endpoint or a Palo Alto firewall, right? Or Varonis. You have these great tools, but they're all independent of each other, right? So how do we get all these great things that we've got to come together and be effective, right? Plus, what do we do to be more proactive, right? How do we get that collision avoidance rather than the reconstruction of the accident, right? So what we found is that Arctic Wolf is a great solution for that. That's something that we're talking to a lot of our clients about. That's what we'd like to go into depth with you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and let him talk about Arctic Wolf and what it does to solve these issues.
Right on. Thanks, Jim. So I'm Ryan Ramsey. I've been here for almost a year. I've been around. I've worked at a partner. I was a Dell for a very long time, and I've known Jim and his folks for, good God, like 20 years maybe, somewhere in that range. So, when we look at security, back in the day, it was always a conversation of which is the best firewall, and MFA really wasn't a consideration back then, but it was very flat. It was a very simple in and out conversation, and that's absolutely not what we see today. We also tended to get into price wars and product wars and fudding, and mine's better than yours because we do this. Like Jim said, these are all tools. So what we are doing is we are providing this whole thing as a service, and we definitely need the folks that are in your company that are currently doing cybersecurity, or the VMware guy that's dabbling in the logs. Because like the biggest problem is that there's so much information that comes in, you can only get the big pieces. You can't really respond properly to the small pieces, yet alone interpret what they're trying to tell you. And so, a lot of the conversation we have, we find that a lot of people have had cybersecurity issues for hundreds of days, and they've been out there just sort of collecting data, doing their thing. Like Jim said, it's extremely sophisticated today. We were on a call yesterday, actually, and some of these environments that are created have countermeasures. So if you decide to flip a port, or whatever it might be, these scripts or processes that run actually have countermeasures against that to maybe initiate an attack or back off a little bit or obfuscate themselves a little bit different. It's not brute force, it's finesse, and that's what's going on today. So what we do is we provide the manpower, the 400 man hours it took to build our environment to you as a service. We walk you through. You get dedicated people assigned to your account, and so what it's not is a box that goes into your environment and rattles off data for you to interpret. It's also not a service that you call when you think something's wrong. Our service is incredibly aggressive and borderline hostile. There's no one that escapes it. So if you are an IT administrator, guess what? We're watching you also. If you're an executive that has access to all your data, we're really watching you, and you're a person of interest. We get to know what your environment looks like, where you host it around the world, what is your cloud presence, what are all the pieces and parts and applications that you're using. And what we end up doing is putting a plan together for you. And this is what we typically call the security journey. If you believe that buying the best in breed firewall is your way out, guess what? That's like stepping stone number one. And the whole idea is you'll hear in cybersecurity about left of boom and right of boom. Left of boom is kind of the prevention, the constant churning of your security profile and your stance, versus right of boom, like Jim said, is completely reactive. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to be reacting to situations that occur and already have it be in a compromised state. We want to interpret data as we get it, turn it into information, and then put a plan together for how to assault that. And then we also have a warranty against our service. So if for any time something happens or you miss something, we have funds available to do things like pay premiums on insurance or enlist remediation, which Jim can get into a little bit later. We rely on them, but we also have our own offering. So next slide. So again, when we look at what Arctic Wolf does, we are delivering a managed security outcome. We want you to say, hey, we're protected, we get notified, we're involved in the process, but I'm not doing the 24/7 miasma of data investigation. I'm getting the outcome of that, and I'm able to react to it. And the way we do this is we have massive threat telemetry. We're a multi-tenant system. So it's not only the information that we're getting from your system, it's what we're getting from around the world, right? We have thousands of customers. They're all contributing to this gigantic SIM that sits out in AWS. And it might be things that they're catching that you're not. We can apply that data into your infrastructure and do checks, like, hey, we found you, there's a phishing email that came in, it originated, and maybe we've seen that in a previous account, and we already have preventative actions for that type of activity. Hit one more. And then the whole idea here is that technology fails, right? Like we're constantly evolving, as is the threat vector. So we validate all this by humanity. We have an incredibly large staff that's put into your account, along with your dedicated staff that's constantly looking at this stuff 24/7. And the biggest complaint that we get is, man, my admins have been looking through logs all day. 10, 12 hours and they've generated nothing. Like it's just information, and they're trying to find stuff and they don't know if they're seeing something, if they're missing something. They don't have a lot of talent in the sim. The sim isn't delivering the outcome that we're looking for. And by the way, how did this get through? So everything that we do is captured by cutting edge technology, but it's always viewed at the human level, and that's where your interaction is. So we've got dashboards and things like that, but really the benefit is you're going to have a team that's talking to you on a daily basis, running weekly reports, having weekly and monthly penetration tests and observations, and giving you the path to how to firm up. So your worst day with Arctic Wolf is the first day, and then we draw a line as far as where you're improving and goal setting. Next slide. Okay, so a little behind the scenes. So for every account, we have 4 layers of triage. One is a dedicated staff, which is the inevitable owner of what you do. And they understand everything about your network, your applications, your workflows, maybe some of the standards you're trying to get to. We have a lot of people that want to escalate to NIST 800-171 or CMMC or VSA, whatever it might be. It's important to us that you're hitting those metrics. So when the auditor comes in, you don't end up with like a laundry list of stuff that's confusing that you can't execute to. If we live in that framework, I can check the boxes off early and make the auditing experience a little more, I don't want to say pleasurable, but not as invasive and, maybe something to look forward to. We do this through setting a security posture. So again, like when we onboard, we look at where you are, we look at your equipment, how it's configured, and that's the baseline. And then as we start to move forward, we start to set up goals. And we have a badge system, the bronze, gold, platinum, all that kind of stuff. But what we want to do is get you to like the platinum stage, where we can say, hey, this is a company that is fortified. They have a procedure on how to do these type of things. We run spider reports that says that this exchange system is hardened. This SQL system is hardened to our best practices. And it also complies with some sort of a framework. And for us, NIST is kind of king. And then like what's after the first day, we want to chart a course, and we have to define who does the work. Is it you? Is it us? Are we doing remediation, or are we helping you define a flow of what needs to be done? Or do we engage someone like SNL to actually do it? And that's kind of where people stop. Where we see the benefit of like this union is I want to track progress, and I want to have a Gantt chart or a program manager or something around like these initiatives. And then I want to recognize the results and then repeat it again. So it's a constant journey. It's not something that we solve by a purchase or like Jim said, a tactical project. It's at the base layer of what we do. It's the living and breathing of security versus, hey, let's do a security check this week. Like that's not how it rolls. So it's very intensive. Next slide. So when we compete with people and we talk about solutions, we get into a services conversation versus a product conversation sometimes. And the product is the product. The product is the tool. So what we want to be able to do is we want to provide feedback, not only how threats evolve, and Jim mentioned Log4j, and that's the gift that's going to keep giving for years and years and years, because it's so embedded in the systems that everybody uses today from every vendor out there. But it's also, how do your systems change? Did you decide, hey, I'm going to go from CrowdStrike to Microsoft, Defender, all of that stuff? We need to make sure that decisions that you make internally are first visualized, but also put into this plan so that we don't leave open holes and start to look like shadow IT. One of the beauties of what we do, though, is we are agnostic to the endpoint devices. And this is important because a lot of people will say, hey, we're the best, we're Gartner Magic Quadrant up into the right. But the reality is, like, they don't necessarily have a complete offering. Their device only does certain things, or it gets false positives, or whatever it is, it hasn't evolved, or other people have evolved past it. One of the things that our customers like is you can evaluate the tool that suits right for you. And from our point of view, we integrate with a lot of that stuff. All I need is an API or a log source or some sort of telemetry I can get from that tool, which there's a lot of. But what I'm not is a consultant to say, hey, these are better tools than this one. What we do say is, like, with this tool, you will get this kind of coverage, and we might need to like wedge something else in to, deal with email properly, or, whatever it might be.
Right. Just to kind of piggyback on that, that's really where kind of the SNL kind of completes that picture, because we're that's kind of how we've earned our trade, right? So we're constantly going in and talking to people about solutions that meet their technical and business objective. The business objective is typically, it's a budget constraint, right? Not always, but typically, right? So whereas Arctic Wolf is completely platform agnostic, we're vendor agnostic. So, we can help, guide you as far as what is the best bang for your buck. And realistically, like Nathan mentioned, we're looking at the entire solution stack. Your IT dollar has to go for security and infrastructure and all those other things, right? That's where we're the other half of that coin, right? So where you do need to do, a strategic upgrade or replacement, we can help you guide you through that process, right? And then it gets seamlessly integrated with the rest of your security ecosystem, right, through Arctic Wolf, right? We don't have to worry about that, right? So it really is an enabling solution, right? So that you can leverage your IT spend at any point across the spectrum, right? Using Arctic Wolf to kind of fill in those gaps that you might have to do with either people or other products.
Yeah, Jim, that's a good point. By us having a platform and being vendor agnostic, the other thing I don't run into is you getting stuck. And so because we are the service side and we are subscription, we work on a yearly basis, or whatever however we decide to work. One of the things we want to do is we want to give you some progress. So we do all of the regular reporting and meetings and all that stuff. But I'll give an example. I have a friend, another part of IT, they went in about one of these Cisco meeting systems, and IT didn't know about it. This was a decision that was made at the upper ranks. And we came back and said, hey, you know what, like, this opens up a giant security hole, because where you want to put it, the data center you're going to put it in isn't necessarily like the right place. It's not going to work with your VPNs or your WAS, whatever it might be. We're giving information there on what the side effects were, and CEOs are able to take this information and say, hey, wait a minute, before we make this purchase, we should think about this and have our security posture included in the implementation process of our purchasing behavior. And that makes a big deal, because if you're trying to do this yourself, that's like the quickest way to cripple yourself, by having someone from outside the business, like an installer or whatever, install something, figure out ports that makes their product work, but forsaking your posture that we've established and that we're working on, and not have visibility into the ramifications of it. So, like, we want to know that stuff. And again, if you were to put system in your environment, we would know about it, because it would trigger all sorts of alerts, and we would have you would get a phone call, and we would work on that together to identify what it is, what it's trying to do, and set up a roadmap for you. So, okay, so next slide. So when, and we're kind of getting to the tail end here. So when we look at what Arctic Wolf does, and again, like Jim said in the beginning, there's a strategic side and a tactical side. The tactical side sometimes tends to be a little bit right of boomy, where like you've already discovered something and now you're taking action. But the strategic side is I've got hundreds of people on the front end looking at this data from not only your networks, but from around the world. We're giving guidance. And again, it's not like you call us with a question. We're calling you. We are scheduling meetings. We are providing documentation. We are providing escalations and ticketing to your systems for things that we don't like. And if you decide that you want to hit the snooze button on something because like you like FTP in your environment, guess what? Like, we'll hit the snooze also, but it's going to go into a report that says, hey, these are violations to our agreement, for NIST or whatever it is that we're trying to get you to. And we really need to take care of this stuff. But for whatever reason, you've got like an ice cream machine that only works on Telnet. We're going to draw those out and we're going to try to work on a plan to fortify around it. And that comes from the expertise side. We have literally hundreds of front end folks. There's 3 tiers of them. So in order for an issue or even an event log to progress up, it's got to go through 3 tiers, and then someone has to sign off and say, hey, this isn't important, or this is usually important, but it's for this company, there's an exception because of how you do things. And then there's the guidance side. There's the portion, the positional portion, which is, hey, you're doing this today. You don't have an MFA. So like, let's work on that project and what it gives you. And let's talk about MFA for your SaaS stuff also, as well as your cloud and your internal and how your employees are going to use this. From the tactical side, our big play is coverage. We're 24/7, 365. Our system is hosted in 5 countries in AWS. All of our support is local to you in the United States. And not only are we looking for predecessors, for precursors of an issue, but we also do the investigation. We also do the threat hunting. We are also doing like the dark web investigations to make sure that you don't have compromised accounts or even collateral out there on the dark web. That's what we're doing in the background. Burnout is a big issue in IT, especially in security. So our employees are not allowed to do a single task for more than 3 hours. They have to cycle. Maybe it's doing tickets or threat hunting or working on reporting or logs, whatever it might be. So we have focus. We have people that are incredibly focused on what they do, but they're excited and encouraged and engaged versus, again, looking at logs for 10 hours and being able to produce nothing. That's not the situation over here. So when we break this down a little bit, I go to the next slide. We look at the strategic side with like the posture reviews, named advisors. You're going to have 2 to 3 people assigned to your account by name that are responsible for you, that get all the kudos, but also, the investigations on how well are they doing in the account. The security journey guidance. It's very, very, very important to us that the first day is your worst day. And as we continue this relationship, we're building you and fortifying you. And we get you to a point where you look back and you say, wow, I can't believe that was my stance. Now you're looking like a brick wall house, and you're really kind of impenetrable. But you're evolving with threats. We're doing the reviews, and we're also giving you insights as to what's causing noise in the environment and how to get rid of it, and things that are important that look like noise that maybe you've been kind of like pawning off because it's just too much information. On the tactical side, next slide. It's like I said, it's rapid response. This is a this is a game and an esport now. Time is your currency. I just don't have the time to be able to say, hey, you know what these logs are telling me, and then doing the research and taking a day or a week, or in a lot of cases, the industry average is 210 days of malware living in your system before action's taken over it. I need it now. So we have a 30-minute SLA from the time that we determine there's something that's critical in your system to giving you a plan and working with, you know, either you or your VAR or with us to remediate. And then we retest it and we make sure that it goes away so that you don't install on the first day, get a bunch of alerts. The alerts don't go away, you forget about them, and then you find out that like someone is piggybacking on those alerts, and you become numb to it. We look at every single thing that comes in, and then you know we're looking at everything that you put in. So if you decide later on, you know, hey, I've got the MF2, or you know, I'm going to do like an IDP or something, we want to be engaged with that too, to help you counteract any things that typically come in from poor installation or installation that doesn't meet your security profile. And next one. So the guts of it, Heidi helped to build this out a little bit. There you go. So all the stuff on the bottom there is what you have traditionally been accountable for, your endpoints, your phones, laptops, computers, VMs, whatever it might be. Then you got a network guy, you know, he's typically, you know, involved in more routing issues and things like that. But a lot of what we find is stuff that lives natively in the network. An overwhelming amount of information, actually. It's not stuff like scripts and things. It's exploits. It's you know, just zero-day attacks and things like that. Your cloud presence, as we move away from on-prem and installed applications, now we're looking at software as a service. We're looking at mega clouds like AWS and Google and Azure. I need to see all this stuff through one pane of glass, right? Not through separate products, that don't talk to each other. I need all this to come down to one. Identity management. This is my only plea for today. If you do not have two-factor authentication, stop everything you're doing today and go get it. This is, in my opinion, the single most important element in a secure data center. You know, passwords, you know, those are all fine. There's many ways to breach a password today, but like the two-factor is really the saving grace of your evolutionary path to being a little bit more secure. So I would really encourage you to have that, or to look into it and ask for opinions. And then lastly is the human factor. It doesn't matter if you're an IT, if you're a security specialist, if you're my mom, we all make mistakes. We all click on stuff we shouldn't. I try to sell something on Facebook Marketplace, and a bad actor tried to get my EMEI for my phone to validate my identity, and you know, I'll share that if we get together. But it's no longer you know, like power and water. It's not a utility. There is a posture that you must take with my corporate data or my corporate asset, or you being at home working through my VPN. That's indisputable, and we help you define that. So if you're using anything like Ningio or KnowBe4, we have a different way of doing it that ties into this whole initiative. And again, it all goes through like the same CSEs and the same pane of glass. Build one more. So that's a challenge. We drop our XDR architecture on this, and we've heard XDR a lot, right? Like XDR has now become a marketing term. What it's supposed to mean is I've got all these pieces and I hook into an interface where that interface provides information or provides data that I can create information on. So that's something that's really unique for us, is I can have any product that's out there that speaks in a log or an API, and I can assimilate it. What it doesn't mean is you have to use all of my stuff. I want you to go out and I want you to critique other products, because there's different products that are better for a law firm, better for, a football stadium. But I want all that data. And then build up one more. And so on top of that, we have the concierge model, and to build it up all the way until it says incident response on that array. One more, and one more, and one more. There we go. There we go. So I'm doing all the things. I'm doing all the monitoring. I've got humans looking at this. I'm looking at your cloud. I've got a graphical representation of how all of these logs go together. So I can dig into a specific incident. I can explode out to see what's happened. A lot of times we get questions, hey, Joe is, leaving the company in 2 weeks. Can you monitor him to make sure that he's not moving data off? Well, that's great. He's already given you notice. I want to know what he's done in the last 90 days, right? Obviously you spent time getting a new job. I want to make sure that none of your collateral has left, that he's not using a personal device to move things sideways. I have methodology for that, and I can do that by homing in on Joe and then zooming out and looking at days and assets and pieces of software and maybe the cloud presence. We have access to all of that. The managed risk portion, like I said, is us verifying that what you put in your environment is configured correctly, doesn't have any open holes. And I retest through penetration testing, over and over and over, to make sure that this is done. It's not done once a year. It's done far more frequently, because you're always adding devices. Someone's putting a new laptop on. I need to know that that laptop doesn't have something like EtherCap running on it. I'm looking at your cloud security. I'm looking at your managed security awareness, which is your humans. If you have a compliance requirement, I've got packs for that to narrow down the width of what your posture looks like, and say, hey, I want to go down the 171 route, or the CMOC 2.0 because I deal with the military. I've got specific information to get you on that road. And then if all else goes wrong, I've got incidents response, not only internal to Arctic Wolf, but through partners, through using your technicians. We're going to get this resolved. We're going to get you back up and running. And Jim can talk about this a lot, because we walked into potential customers that are actually under fire, and the process is pretty incredible. And it's not just here's a couple KBs. It's here's the plan, here's the milestones. Let's get this knocked out. Okay, next one. And again, if there's any questions, or you have a contrary view to anything that we're saying, put it in chat. We're not talking necessarily about product. We're talking about methodologies to really stay safe out there. I'm only going to touch a little bit on this, but the MDR, we are offering a fully managed SIM. So if you're going through an audit, or you're going through cybersecurity questionnaires, not only do you get to check off I have a SIM box, but also that it's being completely managed, and you've got 24/7 monitoring on that. If you believe that when you go home at night, all cyber attacks stop, that's not right. Also, we also have log retention. So a lot of companies, especially hospitals, they need logs for a very, very long period of time, not only for the audit, but to be able to go back and say, hey, is some of the stuff that I'm seeing today, have we seen it in the past? All of that's there. And then we do the rules. And one of the big merits is that we're not going to nickel and dime you. So I want all your data. If you add a new log source, a new device, there's no charge for that. I want every piece of application that gives me data for telemetry. And so it's unlimited, versus a lot of guys, it's in number of alerts, or it's in quantity. Next slide. From the
just real quick, I'd like to add something to that also. Typically what we find is that the managed detection response, that's really kind of the opening bid, if you will. And that's really what we find the best value for our clients are. And the thing that we found is that when you get in and you start pricing out realistic pricing for, a quality scene tool, right? And then, just how much capacity you're going to consume as far as disk utilization. A moderately sized firewall is going to generate 3 gigs of log data per day per site, right? Start doing the math on just, and you've got to renew that tool every year. You've got to retain that log information for at least 90 days. It's probably going to be 3 years, right? When you start to do the math for, man, I gotta buy all this stuff. And then you look at the pricing for, well, wait a minute, I get all of that as part of the solution, and I get people eyes on glass 24/7. It's a very compelling business model, right? So even doing it yourself, as opposed to paying somebody to have the tool already built, it's already built, tuned, it's ready to go. You just drop into it. Very compelling solution.
Yeah, we're doing petabytes and trillions of logs a week on such a massive scale. I need the cloud. I can't do it with a single box that sits in your infrastructure with a couple sockets. I need thousands to be able to churn this stuff out and derive correlation, which is where we find our issues. It's not your issues are not going to come from a log from a Palo Alto saying, hey, you know, this is happening. It's going to be like 50 or 60 logs that have correlation that you've got to be aware of how they fit together. And this is where managed risk comes in. It's really important that nothing goes in your infrastructure without being alerted on and checked. It's also important to us that it's configured properly and that you're using best practices to challenge it, right? We have spiders for a lot of stuff that make sure that, you know, like one, it's configured correctly, but two, that you're not configuring it to an application or a framework inside of your company that defies, you know, your NIST rules or your CMMC rules. So that's all part of managed risk. Literally, if you put something in the network, it's going to ring a bell. And we know this because when we do installations, I would say 9 times out of 10, someone says, wow, you know, I didn't even know like these boxes were here. You know, this is from like the old data center, or, you know, these assets have been retired, or, you know, why do I have Bitcoin running at 2 o'clock in the morning? Like we're going to find all that stuff. And then we're going to report on it. And then one more slide. And then the MSA. This is, I think this is something that we all cringe as employees, like, oh God, another security training. We do it a little bit different. Our attention span has gone from, if you're old as me, you know, getting an encyclopedia in a library to 240 characters on a Twitter that can change your opinion about things. It's important that I get ahead of it. And it's important that I train the humans so that the behavior that I want to see in your company is also instilled in life and moved on to like their, you know, to your children, so that when they go to work for another company, they know, hey, you know, this is my behavior on the internet today. This is how I deal with data. You know, everyone's on social media. I would challenge you to, you know, like how many times does a customer come into your building and you don't check an ID? Could that be me kind of like socially engineering? These are all things that we focus on that are not about like, hey, email acumen and, you know, closing your laptop. They're really about like, how do we become safe citizens so that I don't bring my laziness into your company and compromise you. And all of this information, again, goes into your framework, into your portal. It's gamified. I can do things like identify bad actors. Like if you're a traveler versus someone that sits in the office, like I know who you are. We've had, Jim, we were talking about this the other day, last week, where, you know, a salesperson went to a different country and they said, hey, I can't log in through the VPN. Yeah, you know, you can't log in the VPN because I'm not going to change the rules specifically for you. You know, these are our standards. And, you know, maybe before you took that trip, you should have told someone in IT so I could tell Arctic Wolf, because you just drew a ticket for us. You know, you shouldn't be logging in out of Taiwan on a corporate asset without a VPN. Like these are all failures. So the security awareness is super important. We do the phishing attacks, like all the stuff you would think. And we all fail. Every single one of us fails at these because we've taken our eye off the ball, or we're lazy, or like I'm super good at fishing. So all of those are the 3 packages that are typically included in what we do. And I think, is that our last slide, Heidi? Yeah, there we go. So, so we'll wrap it up with the SNL folks. But again, I hope just some of this anecdotal data has been interesting. Even if we don't talk about product, if you have a requirement just to ask questions, call us, call Jim, call me. You know, we do lunches and all that stuff, but it's like keeping people safe in this era today is more important than selling something. And that's the reason I really came over here. So that's it for me. Heidi or Jim or whoever, take it from here.
Turn over to Nathan.
Right on.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Jim. Every time I learn something new. Thank you everyone for attending. We will be following up with you, probably myself and some of my sales team will follow up within the next couple of days, and we'll shoot out those Grubhub e-gift cards to you so you guys can get some lunch. But more importantly, please set a time with us so we can talk further about Arctic Wolf and maybe meet you over lunch in person or schedule another webinar call, something like that. And if you're willing to go to the next step and to meet us in person or for another call, we will give you a pair of tickets to your local amusement park if you're here in Southern California and prefer Magic Mountain with the crazy rides, or maybe Disneyland or Knott's Berry Farms. We'd like to set you up. So please be in touch with us in the future. But thanks more than anything for taking the time out of your day.
All right. Any questions, comments?